Good morning. You're listening to WPVM FM in Asheville, North Carolina, 103.7 on the dial. This is the BLAINESWORLD show, and we're heard each Wednesday at 9 a.m., and you can also watch us on WPVM's Facebook page. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield. I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina, and each week we focus on the Asheville theater scene, as well as on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my first guest, and she is Chaplain Vanessa James with the Buncombe County Jail Ministry. And you can feel free to wave to all your fans and friends on Facebook.
Hello.
Okay, great. Chaplain Vanessa James received a Bachelor of Religion from Davidson College and a Master of Divinity from Princeton Theological Seminary in Clinical Pastoral Education. She has worked as the resident chaplain in Geisinger Trauma Hospital and Pastoral Care Director at White Deer Run Drug and Alcohol Rehab in Pennsylvania, and Regional Reentry Specialist for North Carolina Department of Commerce. She has license experience in the Baptist, Presbyterian, and non-denominational traditions. She works here in Asheville for the Buncombe County Detention Facility, and also for one of my favorite organizations, ABCCM, Asheville Buncombe County Christian Ministries, as a chaplain at the Buncombe County Detention Center. And the question I ask first, Chaplain James, is, as a kid, you grew up where?
I grew up originally in Hickory, North Carolina, Catawba County, and I lived there, grew up there, and then eventually, as you said, mentioned Davidson College, and then up north to Pennsylvania and New Jersey.
And when you were a child growing up in the Hickory area, did you always know you wanted to be a chaplain?
Well, I always had this heart to help people, and even people would come up to me even in high school. And then I always had a desire. And so one of the thoughts came to me was like, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be someone that is there to help. But as I listened to their problems, I realized that underneath all the problems was something spiritual going on, some tug of war inwardly. And so that's made me start to think about chaplaincy.
When you went to Davidson College, what was your major?
My major was religion.
Oh, it was, okay. But so at that time, were you moving in the direction of wanting to become a chaplain?
I just knew I had a heart for God's word and to help people, and
Cool.
I didn't know where exactly that was going to take me. I thought about missions. There's something called YWAM, so I thought about that. But a friend of mine lived in New Jersey, and she said, well, why don't you go check out Princeton Theological Seminary? And I decided to visit with her over one of the holidays, and bam, there I was.
And growing up as a kid, either in school or even before college, did anybody in particular inspire you?
I would first say my mom and my dad, to be honest with you. They were very grounded in the word and was always helping even strangers, even people in need. Uh, they had a different level or different calling upon their lives, even than just the local church. They went outside the boundaries to help individuals, and their heart, their faith truly inspired me. So that was my first start.
As a kid, did you get involved in anything, with the church or any programs?
Well, I play the piano a little bit,
Okay.
but even as a teenager, I taught Sunday school, and it went on from there, helping in different little organizations they would have at the church.
Now talk about then your first, so after you go to college, then you went to Princeton for the school there. And so what was your first gig after that?
Well, I did an internship at a hospital there in Pennsylvania, and then from there I served as a pastoral um, care counselor, minister of an alcohol and drug treatment center after I graduated from seminary.
Okay, that was your first job
Uh,
for the most part? Primary? Yeah.
well, I sometimes I get that and the hospital confused, but I think I was at the hospital first. It was a trauma center. It was a hospital where they helicoptered individuals in, and they would throw me the wallet or throw me the purse as they were bringing people in, and I had to search and see who the family member was. And once I found who that family member was, I would contact the family and say, I need to speak with so and so and let you know that your loved one is here and we need you to come in. We need to talk with you about what's going on. And now I remember at that time I was also filling in at the alcohol and drug rehab. And when that minister resigned, he said, "You're going to be my first choice to take my place here at this facility."
Talk about both things you just mentioned, and I give you an awful lot of credit, because especially the first one, where you're making that call, that must be a tough call to make, or especially when you first started making the calls, to tell somebody they better come in quickly. Is that tough?
Uh, yes and no, no and yes, because I've already sensed the Holy Spirit is there to help me, and I remember that the other person on the line, they're going to need me to have some sense of peace, and so if I keep that peace in mind when I make that call, I have to stay at that level of peace so that even though I'm encouraging them to come in with an emergency, if I'm talking with
Right.
anxiety and stress, is going to make them anxious and stressed. And so I try to communicate with them. I don't know all the details about your loved one and how they're doing. I'm not the medical staff, but as you come in, I'm going to be there to greet you and sit with you as the medical staff comes in and talks with you about the condition of your loved one.
Now, do you then, the people you call on the phone, you then get to speak to them when they come in? You're the person they speak to?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Now, was this also, again, their first job, so was that sort of a non-denominational thing? It was like all religions, or was it keying in on one religion?
Yes, at the hospital, you
Well,
don't
that's what I was wondering, right.
check their religion at the door.
Or on the phone, right, yeah.
Or the phone,
Yeah.
you welcome everyone. And so, again, as I stressed before, just having that sense of peace because of whatever faith or non faith or no faith at all, there is that language of peace and hope that I would try to offer individuals who connected with their person that was in need.
Now, when you then were also doing the drug counseling, the alcohol and drug counseling, was that a challenge, I guess, for you in terms of if you hadn't been through what they had been through? You know, was it difficult at times to relate to some people?
Again, I would say no. I know in the society that we're living in, there's this big stress about peer support, and
Right,
I
right.
am a peer support specialist, and I'm quite an advocate of that. Some of my dear friends are right there in the midst of that. But again, I point to the calling of my life, for the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor, release to the captive, recovery of sight to the blind. And also, I'm reminded of a Bible story where Jesus, I do a weekly Bible study, and this week's is called my "Who's Your Daddy?" And somehow I got in the writing that I got to the story where they bring a lady to Jesus who was caught in the very act of adultery, and Jesus, they wanted to throw stones at this woman, and Jesus says, "He who is without sin," and that could be he or she who's without a struggle in their lives. Not saying that all addiction is related to sin, but it's related to a struggle. And so, because I understood that struggle, I could meet individuals right where they were, and I haven't had any problems then or even now at the jail.
Talk about writing sermons. How often do you do that?
Well, my heart and call is to minister the good news. And so I look for those opportunities. I used to, when I was in Pennsylvania and in the denomination that I was in at that time, Presbyterian, whenever a congregation was without a minister, either vacation or they didn't have a minister, I would be the one that filled in. So I would constantly go and share with a congregation. Since being in Asheville, I haven't had that many opportunities, but the Lord has taught me two things. One is that a sermon is not just behind a pulpit. So we as believers are, if someone who is a believer, I know that when I share love and hope and encouragement of Jesus, even in my everyday interaction, even with the lost, the broken, the hurting, the grieving, sometimes that's even more of a powerful sermon than what's behind a pulpit. So that's one answer. And then the other answer is because I do love to write. I do love to declare. I do a weekly devotional, and that I pass out to probably 100 or 120 or 30 to the individuals at the jail, and even to those who are not on the list. So anyone listening today who would like to have a copy on a weekly basis, they're welcome to receive it. And so each week, like I said, with I don't know when this airs, it'll be in the month of June, I believe.
Right, yes.
It's Father's Day. So Who's Your Daddy is the devotional that I was working on, and that brings up a lot of questions for individuals. And so that written devotional becomes my sermon that's on the inside, burning to be expressed.
Talk about the offer you just made, which is a very sweet offer, but you mentioned that if anybody's listening or watching this, if they want it, you have a mailing list, or they can get on a website. Where would they find out about what you just talked about?
Yes, they can. I have a plethora. I love using that word
Me
of
too, yeah.
emails, but they could, the two main ones that's specific to here, and then I do have another one where I send out the devotional. But the chaplain is a partnership with ABCCM and the sheriff's office. So I have the Buncombe County email, which is Vanessa, VANESSA .James at buncombecounty.org, or they can email the Vanessa.James at abccm.org. And eventually, once you get to me, that's easy because it's based on my name, then I would put you on a mailing list through something called Keys to the Kingdom.
Okay, very nice. And so that people get on that mailing list, there's no charge for that?
No charge at all. I do it weekly as part of my chaplain way to serve the detainees, but because the information there, it asks pertinent questions. Sure. It asks the deeper level questions, so a person can fill it out on a personal level. They could use it in a Bible study, but it also has insightful things to think about in those Bible studies or in those devotions.
How many people are on your mailing list, ballpark?
Right now, there's probably about 20, 25. I did do them also for the church, but right now that I've come on full time with ABCCM, I am exploring churches or exploring faith-based organizations to see which ones would be open to welcoming someone who has a criminal background.
And talk a little bit, Chaplain James, if you would, as to what you do at ABCCM. So we have the title, but that entails what? What are your typical duties?
Okay, so ABCCM has several program directors, and I'm the jail ministry program director. They have crises ministries, they have Transformation Village, they have the vet quarters, and they have Veterans of the Carolinas. They have Costello House and a recovery house that's just opening. And so my role as the jail ministry program director, one is to meet with those program directors as we discuss and give each other feedback. I also go into the communities and visit various faith-based organizations or just agencies, because I'm an advocate of healing and wholeness. So there needs to be that relationship with places like Sunrise or RHA or mental health. And so I'm still working on building some of those relationships, so I have places to refer individuals. I also, because of the jail ministry, we have a first Saturday of the month prayer time where we come together every first Saturday and pray for the High Sheriff, Quentin Miller, and also the detainees, as well as the officers and staff that work there at the facility. And so we pray from 9:30 to 11. We move it around each Saturday so we can get a flavor again for the different faith-based communities in the area. And then also ABCCM, in addition to sponsoring me as a full-time, they have another chaplain that assists me for about 20 hours per week, Chaplain Don Johnson. And then when we're not under the COVID restrictions, we have a team of volunteers that comes into the jail, to the detention facility, to provide programming for the detainees there.
And if I can jump in here a second, first we'll make an observation, then another question. But the observation, I'm wondering, do they also give you roller skates to, with your job to get to all these? I mean, I'm listening to you and said, wow, you get around, I guess, different
Yes,
facilities.
yes. And I think two things. One, that desire to move even has been on my heart always, even from Pennsylvania when I would go from church to different churches. I think part of my call is to serve a bigger region, so to speak. I know that when I worked for the state, and again, I just resigned there in December, I covered the 25 counties of the West as a regional reentry specialist. So I was always driving.
I was going to say, so you carried the roller skates with you then from that job to this?
Yes, I did.
Wow.
I did.
We'll talk a little bit about, though, for the benefit of the question, for the benefit of the folks who don't know what ABCCM is. It's just such a magnificent organization. Explain how it is that it's you do work with lots of different people with ABCCM. What is it all about?
Okay.
ABCCM.
The Asheville Buncombe County Community Christian Ministries. I might have put an extra C in there. But this organization realizes that Jesus, we are the hands and feet of Jesus, and we have to reach out into the community. And one of the famous verses of ABCCM is a verse from Matthew 25, and Jesus there at the kingdom at the very end is separating the sheep from the goats, and he asks each person or each individual, when did you see me hungry? When did you see me sick or in prison or a stranger or lonely or afraid, or however you want to phrase the question? And some would say, well, when were you there? But then Jesus says, as much as you've done it to the least of these, you've done it unto me. And that becomes the theme of ABCCM, as the least of these sometimes is a veteran who has served our nation and fought tremendously with guts and blood in different countries as well as here, and then they come back, and what they experience has impacted their mind, their mental health, their physical, and they need some support. So we have the veterans quarters that provides housing, and that's expanding through Veterans of the Carolinas. Is expanding throughout the state. Actually, we have Transformation Village, which is a place for mothers and their children who don't have a place to live, who may be struggling with addiction and other needs. There is the Crises Ministry. If a person is hungry and doesn't have any place to get food, or they need clothing, or just a place to sit for the day. There's several crises ministries throughout our county, not just one, but I think maybe even 4 or 5. I might, forgive me with the number there. And then Costello House, it was a place that we're taking in people for cold purple when the temperatures dipped below freezing, but also it's transitioning, or there's also another recovery ministry that's opening up for men that is just new on the scene. So again, ABCCM includes the jail ministry as well as all these other outreaches that I mentioned.
And the thing that impresses me so much with ABCCM and your work as well is the point, and hopefully viewers are getting this and listeners are getting this, that rather than any one church doing everything, which would be impossible for them to do, what was the number of churches at ABCCM in ballpark? How many churches does it encompass?
To be honest, I don't know the number, but you made an excellent point that one church cannot reach in all those individuals. So we depend upon those volunteers. Or if someone is listening today and you're part of a congregation, you're not part of ABCCM, please call me and I'll connect you to the right people. We are always interested in new volunteers and always there to speak and share what ABCCM does with anyone that's listening.
And it never escapes me, but I remember it was something in the hundred, I think like 300 plus.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I hope people are getting the beauty of this, that in terms of if you want to contribute to society, you want to contribute to the ministry, whatever you want to contribute to, you could try to find it all on your own, I guess. And if your church doesn't do it, then you're out of luck. Or I see ABCCM, I hope you take it as a compliment, but it's almost like a one-stop shopping service, that
Very much so.
You want to serve not only the Lord, but it's not even the Lord. You just want to society or mankind, that ABCCM will find a place for you to do something. Would you say that's true?
That's very true. If you want to be the hands-on feeding the hungry, or if you want to do the hands-on of helping someone who's dealing with addiction, or if you want to contribute financially, we have auctions and galas and golf tournaments that people can participate in, and if they don't have the time or energy, can contribute financially and see great things happen with their monies. Sometimes we give money, but we don't see what happens with it. But through ABCCM, you will.
Oftentimes, very good point. And talk a little bit about what you just mentioned, that folks want to get involved, for example, for volunteering. How would they get involved?
Yes, they can go to abccm.org. They have a website that's available. And also we have a Facebook page at ABCCM, and that will give you direction as to where and how to volunteer. And you definitely can reach me at vanessa.james@abccm.org, and I can put you in contact with the right person.
Okay. Now, do you work with any of the volunteers, or do they help you out at all?
Yes, you might have missed that point, but the jail itself, again, right now we're a little bit on the COVID restrictions,
Sure.
so we only have a handful of people that just now started to come back. But when we're up and running at great capacity, volunteers who have been vetted by the system, they have to have background checks, etc., and make sure they follow the policies of the jail. But once they're vetted by both ABCCM and the Sheriff's Office, they are allowed to conduct a Bible study or faith-based organization that shares hope with the actual detainees inside the facility.
So it seems to me this would be a great opportunity for somebody, if they want to get involved or they want to pursue this kind of volunteering or work, just jump in and you'll put them to work.
Yes, very much so. We're always looking for volunteers because we can't do it ourselves.
Let me put you on the spot here a little bit. In terms of the stuff you do, I'm going to ask you two questions. One, would you say there's a most rewarding thing that you do in your job on a weekly, monthly, yearly basis?
Yes, in addition to serving people, the most rewarding is when I see an individual who is there in our detention facility and they have an aha divine revelation moment, and they realize that their fear, hurt, shame, unforgiveness, anger, guilt, loneliness, abuse contributed to their addiction or their crime or their charge. And in that revelation, they're like, oh, wow, these things they contributed to why I'm here. That doesn't excuse what I've done. It doesn't justify what I've done, and it's not going to get me out of trouble. But with this revelation that, wow, this hurt and pain in my past contributed where I are, then healing can happen. And then the rehabilitation can happen and the change can happen. And they realize, wow, I don't have to be identified by that pain nor identified by my crime, even though I may have to pay some of the consequences. But now that I realize some of what has contributed to this crime and addiction, then now I can get the healing that I need and the rehabilitation that I need and move forward.
Personally, have you seen some of that in terms of people you've worked with in a period of time? Have you seen them make that shift?
Yes, I have seen individuals make that shift. The ones, again, who make the shift are the ones who get to the nitty gritty pain.
But that really must be exciting when it happens.
It is very exciting. It also comes with the challenge. The challenge is there are individuals who are there at the facility, and then we see them back. It's because they resorted back to the negative choices in their lives, or they're struggling with the disease of addiction. Sometimes I think the pandemic of fentanyl and drug addiction is a greater one than the other pandemics that we name. And the individual, they've made those negative choices, not really taking into the account the consequences upon themselves, their family, their community, and all of them around them, and how it's going to impact them. It's like they're in this insanity, as we say, of doing the same things over.
I think we're frozen just a little. There you go. Okay. We're frozen a little bit, Chaplain James. Let's see if we can get out of it. But as we're kind of working out a freezing situation.
Some receive the divine revelation. The chaplain has to realize.
Okay, yeah, we were just frozen for a minute, but I think we got that. Let me ask you also a follow-up question. In terms of when people come in to see you, I guess some of them, if not a lot of folks, I guess feel hopeless or that they can't get out of where they are. What do you do when somebody is in that state, or they just tell you they're hopeless, or they come across that way? Can you help them get out of there?
I believe that with the intervention of the Holy Spirit, first of all, being an active listener and letting them know that they care. I know sometimes they haven't had anyone listen to them for the very first time. Sometimes I say to the men, if someone would have allowed you to cry, maybe you wouldn't have been in this situation, or to talk about for the first time the raw abuse that's underneath the struggles. And let them know I'm not there to condemn you. I'm not there to send you to hell. I'm there to walk with you through the valley of the shadows, and these shadows are making their toll. But the revelation I have is that even in the darkness, the only way you're going to have shadows in the darkness is if there's a little bit of light that shines through. So I try to be that light as someone is walking, and letting them know that they can, if they keep walking, even if it's a baby step, we can get to the end and find some hope and some peace where they're feeling hopeless and giving up.
How do you get people away from this cycle before they get into it? In other words, when you reach somebody, I assume they're over a certain age, they're over 18, or how old are they typically?
Well, every once in a while, the detention facility does have juveniles that come in, but there's only usually a handful, and not that often. But most of them are over 18, yes.
And so I guess the tough question, and maybe we'll say this for a second time we have it on the show, is how do you prevent people from getting into this vicious cycle, in terms of when they're 17, 15, 13, I guess that's where a lot of it starts at some point in time, I guess what say that your job is to help them get out of that. Would you say that's true?
Well, yes, to get out of it is the ultimate
Right,
goal.
right.
And again, as I said before, that's going to involve a holistic approach. There are other pieces in terms of the recovery, the mental health, even sometimes the medical health that's needed when they're there. But I've learned, even with, let's just say, recovery and quote unquote the 12-step program, even the 12-step program says that there needs to be a higher power intervention. There needs to be this dealing with the people that I have hurt and the people that have hurt me. Um, and so when I try to help people to break that cycle, one, I help them to realize that cycle. Sometimes the cycle is generational. In our detention facility, we have mothers and daughters, fathers and sons, brothers and brothers. We have family connections right there serving time at the same time. And that's it can be heartbreaking, but it also lets me know that
And I think we're frozen a little bit. So as Chaplain James finishes up, can you hear me, Chaplain James? Okay, I think we're frozen, so I'm just going to kind
cycle that happens often with crime and with addiction.
Right. Let me jump in a little bit. We were just frozen for a second. But let me, first of all, thank you very much for being my guest this first half hour on the BLAINESWORLD show. And I'll ask you one more time if you could just repeat best way for people to reach you and find out more.
Yes, because ABCCM and the Buncombe County Detention Facility partner together, you can use either of those emails. First of all, ABCCM, which is vanessa.james@abccm.org. Vanessa is VANESSA.JAMES. And then the same, and with that ABCCM, you can also go to abccm.org, the website, or at ABCCM, the Facebook page. And then with Buncombe County, which is the one I use a lot because I'm there at the detention facility, it's vanessa.james@buncombecounty.org. So either one of those emails or, like I said, the website or the Facebook will work.
Okay. Thank you, Chaplain James, for being my guest this first half hour on the BLAINESWORLD show. Please keep up the great work you're doing because you're really, I think, making a difference. So thank you very much.
And thank you so very much for having me.
Okay.
God
You be
bless.
well. Thank you. You be well. And as Chaplain James works her way out of the studio, we welcome our next guest, and hopefully she'll be with us in just a second. But the next guest, as she works her way into the studio, I should mention that she'll be on WPVM, and WPVM's mission is to foster community through programming that cultivates dialogue to inform and entertain. The station provides a medium for artists, business, community leaders, and nonprofits to share their voice on live radio. Listeners are invited to help support WPVM's efforts by making tax-deductible contributions. They can do so by going to the website, wpvmfm.org, and looking at the donate option on the upper right-hand side. My second guest is Katie Kasben, and welcome aboard, Katie, to the BLAINESWORLD show.
Thank you.
Okay, you can also wave to all your friends and fans in Facebook world. So if you're watching, that's Katie Kasben, and she's Director of Programming and Community Outreach for a really neat organization called Under One Sky Village Foundation. As a former interim teacher, AmeriCorps volunteer, and National Young Leaders instructor, she has over 15 years' experience working with our youth. So what, you started again when you were 7? Was that or 8? Is that to get all those years? She earned her Master's in International Communications in Sydney, Australia. Katie's a singer, artist, and the adoptive mother of 2. And I guess, Katie, the first question I ask, you grew up as a kid where?
Everywhere.
Okay.
I'm a military brat.
Okay. When you were a military brat, as a kid growing up, did you know you always wanted to be Director of Programming and Community Outreach for Under One Sky Village Foundation?
It possibly could have circled through there. I wanted to be a C5 pilot and an actress and a movie star and a singer and a writer and yeah, just about everything. So
That's really cool. It's kind of interesting. You've done a bunch of these things, in terms
yeah,
of,
not the pilot.
Not yet. Watch, I digress. Watch Top Gun Maverick. Have you seen Top Gun Maverick?
I have.
So I want to ask you a question. The show's, when we end the show, I'll ask you off the air about that movie. But in terms of, so that gave you a fix of flying, and you can still fly, right? You can still take flying lessons at some point in time.
True.
What got you into the nonprofit world?
Um, I have gravitated to that over the years just because I have a strong social justice part of who I am. But also, I think moving around so much. I was born in the Philippines and right at the end of the Vietnam War. And so I think kind of pulling back and then 10 schools by the ninth grade, you get to see a lot of the country and the world. And so a whole bunch of different perspectives. And so when you have different people's stories, then you see the need and you see a lot of different sides of things. And so storytelling is very closely related to that as well. So I think the performance part of myself actually naturally blends towards storytelling, which a lot of nonprofits really need storytelling. That's kind of a vehicle of the great stories and the need that we have in our community.
What was your first nonprofit job?
Man,
One of them?
I don't know. And I'm sorry I keep going in and out. It's kind of weird. I like it. I'm Gosh, I don't remember.
Well,
I'll have to think of that. Maybe I'll come back. It'll come
okay.
back.
Where before you've been with Under One Sky for how long?
I'm pretty new, actually, just this year. So just starting in January.
The foundation just started in January?
No, it actually started in 1996.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're since January.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's how I saw you. It sounded kind of cool. I think I saw it on Facebook. And that's how I connected. I said, that sounds like a pretty cool organization. For the folks who don't know what Under One Sky Foundation is, what is it?
So we work, our community we work with and for is youth in foster care or those who have had substitute care. So that could be a kinship placement, adoption, foster care. And our mission is really supporting community connections to support those youth in foster care through camps and self-discovery programs. But it's our vision that really drew me to this organization so much, which is youth in foster care are seen, heard, and valued in North Carolina. And I love that because it's a population that I think everyone has a feeling towards that they would want to help, but it's also like there's so little education when you realize that, gosh, 50% of kids who go through foster care have mental health issues, and none of that is their fault. So there's a great need for us to be educated. And when I was going through this process of adopting our children, my husband and I were something that was really interesting is one of our social workers said these are homeless children, so it's easy for people to want to help homeless populations, unhoused, and there's a very specific thought process you have, but you don't really think of kids as being homeless necessarily. I know that's a disconnect, but these children, through no fault of their own, have been, some of them moved around, I mean, so many times, and they don't know when they come home from school or wherever they are, whether all their stuff's going to be in a plastic bag, and they don't know where they're going. So there's a lot of attachment and self-esteem, obviously, but really there's a caretaking that needs to happen with our community, and that's one of the things that our nonprofit strives to do, is to allow children to just be kids and play while we have trauma-informed staff helping guiding them. And then we also have one-on-one mentors. We have a buddy system so that it's a safe environment. Safety is very important for all these children. So yeah, it's a really important job that we have.
Well, not only is it important, it's almost a pivotal job. So I forget the study or the church who had done it, but they said that perhaps the most important thing you can do for a child is to give them a home, and that, I don't know the statistics, but, crime, you name it, comes as a result of it. As you said, it's kind of, call them homeless kids or whatever, but without a parent, without somebody guiding them, it's very tough for a kid to succeed. It'd be very tough for anybody to succeed. So the foundation comes in then. So explain that. I was reading about it that it's you provide summer experiences for kids, or your experiences all year round.
It's all year round, most of the year round. So we are in a transition moment because it used to be an overnight camp, which
Right.
is great, for a number of days. But because of COVID, of course, we had to regroup, and so now it's day camps. And we, from last year and this year, it's meeting once a month. So, there's pros and cons, of course, but what's great about it is that these kids are having a consistency, and they have a peer group that they are seeing once a month and creating those relationships. And I can tell you from personal experience that attachment and consistency is the most important thing you can have in a child's life. Like, we've made so many mistakes, of course. And at the same time, I think, learned that it's not what you do, it's the relationship that you have. And I think that could be applied to almost anything as a human being.
Well, talk about then the children would come together once a month. First of all, what's the age range of this?
We serve youth from 7 to 19 years old.
Okay, and they meet once a month now. Where do they meet?
Well, so at this year, we have a few places. The Asheville Adventure Center is going to be one of our places. This summer, the Angel K Love Project out in Hendersonville is going to be one of the places this summer. And then the rest of the time, I believe we're going to be every camp other than that at Luther Ridge.
Okay, and talk about then what happens so that they meet once a month with other children, and then I guess volunteers or foster parents, or describe what happens.
So we have exceptional volunteers and staff, trauma informed. That's one of the things that's really wonderful also about our organization is the trauma informed training that all of the staff members go through. Marnie, who is our youth services director, is a phenomenal human being, and we have more than one master's of social work. We have like 4 different licensed social workers who are actually working with us, which is just such a godsend, so that these children have a safe place and a direction, and can also help the rest of us who haven't gone through social work training. So they lead us in these amazing eye-opening trainings, which I think would be good for anybody to have. Just
I was going to say, do the volunteers get this training as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And mentors are invited as well. So it's when we're not at camp, the children are matched with a mentor who is vetted, doing background check. And we have, like I said, the buddy system. And so this is another chance for a child to have a consistent adult relationship that is safe, and a place that, maybe they don't know what's going on at home, but they know that they have this person they can call. And it takes, trust takes a minute to build. And that is just really important to know that. So that's what's so great about our staff. And they keep returning with these incredible qualifications to show up for these kids. And it's really wonderful to see that.
And talk about the process, Katie, if you would. If somebody's listening or watching and they want to become a volunteer, describe that, how they do it, and then we'll talk what they do. Yeah.
So you can go to our website, of course, which is underonesky.org, and it's the number 1. So in Facebook land, I wrote it down. It's hold on, I have it written down. Under One Sky with the ONE. So Under One Sky Village, and that is also the Instagram. So that's another great place if you just want to kind of learn more. Is come. I hate saying these words, but follow us on social media, and we can have conversations there as well. When we've got there's a lot of people who don't really know kind of the situation. So this is a great education place too. But yes, volunteers, go to the website. You can also go to our Facebook page. You can message me. You could email me directly, katie@underonesky.org, again with the number 1. And there's lots of ways that you can connect with us.
Who should consider becoming a volunteer? In other words, what would you call as your ideal volunteer?
So you need to be over 18. We have a diverse group of students, and hopefully are open to, as the years continue. There's I'm sorry, I don't have the exact statistic, but there are a large number of children in foster care who are have a lot of different aspects of themselves that also need a variety of open-minded people to be part of their lives. So it's anyone who has patience and or who would like to experience a relationship and build a relationship with a child that could change their lives. And I mean both lives. We go into this thinking we're helping children, but a lot of the times we are impacted in a way that ends up rippling through the community. And the idea of the village, it's a Under One Sky Village Foundation, so that it does absolutely take a village. And that is not a throwaway statement, as I have learned becoming a parent as an older person and with older children. We could not do this by ourselves. And I think the education piece also is really important. One of the things that drew me to this also is the fact that the children who go to this camp all have experienced some kind of secondary care. So there's actually a quote I wanted to read. It says, "Under One Sky Camp is the only place where I can be myself and not fear judgment by other kids and adults for being in foster care." I was a 12-year-old participant. So that it gives me chills, actually, especially as a military brat, always being an outsider.
Right.
I don't know the same thing that these kids have gone through, but I've been the new kid a lot, and it stinks.
Describe
So-
the mentoring part of the program. So you mentioned that people can volunteer, but they can also be mentors. What do the mentors do?
So the mentors are matched with a child, and then they want to see them 1 or 2 times a month, ideally 2 or 3, but it's up to that, relationship. And it's tricky now with COVID and transportation and things, but we make it happen and we support that. So like going to a tourist game, walking by the river, it really depends on what that relationship, where that goes, finding out what the kids are interested in. But once that relationship is built and that trust and consistency is built, then you have a chance to learn how to trust an adult. Because I think it's hard, especially for maybe people in our generation, that kids, be respectful, do the things. And this idea that these children have never learned to trust adults because that trust has been betrayed and they have been abandoned. And that abandonment, neglect from a young age, and that's not everybody, but that is a large amount of what happens. There's a lot of neglect. It traumatizes you. So you're coming out already traumatized. And then COVID on top of that, 50%, I think, I'm sorry. Yeah. Hold on, I apologize. So this was 50% of, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong thing. Let me start over again. So during the pandemic, of course, now there's more isolation. So the adoption rate dropped 23%. So kids who might have been able to find a family and start that healing process, like there's a lot of extra trauma on top of the foster care community after COVID. So there's a big learning curve that we all need to be on and really support these kids and the families that are doing this work. And it's a great community where you learn a lot. So yes, I encourage people to reach out to be a mentor. The thing that is important is this is definitely one of those organizations where it's not I'm just going to see if I like it. If you want to be a mentor, it's really important for these children that if you show up, that you are showing up 100% for the long haul with them. So we do like a year at a time, and then the kids can decide with their mentor if they want to continue.
As you describe it, it sounds almost like what I guess in some communities, big brother, big sister type thing.
Yeah, very
I
similar.
don't know do we have that in Nashville still?
We
I think
do.
But
We do.
your folks are doing similar kind of things. Is that correct?
Mhm. Absolutely.
Now, how Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say ours, because our children are specifically in a secondary care situation.
Right.
So that's the difference.
Does this ever happen in terms of, and explain the difference, first of all, to me between, so mentor, I understand what they do for you, and so the mentors don't have to be foster parents, but they could be. Is that correct?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
it can be anybody can be a mentor as long as they're over 18, background check. And then we do trauma informed training with them. And that's really important. So that's something that makes us unique. That we have, like I said, Marnie, our youth services director, has incredible training opportunities that she's brought for us. And we reach out with other groups. We've partnered or collaborated with Elida and Crossnor. So it's an important community for us to all get together to help these kids. That's the most important thing.
And for the benefit for the folks who don't know what trauma training is, or trauma induced training, what is it?
Thank you. That's a really great question. So especially children. So trauma is something when that happens, it breaks like your synapses and that's maybe more medical, but it breaks how you see reality, and your sense of self and safety is jeopardized. So things happen a little slower. So for instance, if you did not have a traumatic experience, or haven't experienced abandonment or neglect, you may come upon a situation that's hard, and you get through it, maybe uncomfortable, and then you move on. If you've experienced trauma, you have to look at that in a different way, because the situation may not be anything that is specifically that they can deal with at that time. But even if they could deal with it, it triggers something. So like sight, smell, taste, there's all these different things that happen. Trauma can live in our body and be triggered by something that is completely innocuous. And the reason this is important is that, say, something happened to a child that, I don't want to go super dark, but say something, they were yelled at whenever they were eating Cheerios. So there's a connection to that. So they say that you come and you want to be like, hey, I made you Cheerios. And then they start to, close in or get angry. And it's just like, what's going on? The idea of having trauma-informed training is that you're curious. And you're like, oh, okay, this is a situation or a response that maybe doesn't seem to match the situation to me. Let me look deeper. So let me figure out, and first and foremost, you make sure that kid is safe, and you make sure that they know that you're there. And at that point, they may not want to be touched or held or talked to. And you just have to respect that space. It's there's a really cool thing I learned. Do you know the barking dog? Have you ever heard of that?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So our brain, when it's safe, is the wise owl. So all our circuits are connected here. So when things start to get a little hairy, they kind of like disconnect a little. And then when there's trauma, it's like, ah. So this is the barking dog. And that means all those little circuits, they're not connected to anything. So you can't rationally talk to someone who's dysregulated and be like, hey, just take a breath, calm down. They're not going to hear you at all. So that's really what trauma-informed training. Sorry, I was a little inarticulate at the beginning, but the idea is noticing, being curious, and then having the tools to like hold that safe space. And that's why we have at least a 4-to-1 ratio, and we've got social workers there as well, so that, if things kind of go a little sideways, there's someone who can give that child the attention that they need and let them decide what they're going to do. So we do. Yeah, go ahead.
Explain, if you would, the 4-to-1 ratio.
So we have, if there's we've got 4 children, we've got at least 1 staff member there. So there's never more kids than there are staff, so that the children, and then you don't want it to go the other way either, so that they feel like there's all these adults around. So it's a pretty cool balance. But the kids know that there's adults there if they need them, but there's not anyone like hanging over them, making them do things, which is, again, that's the challenge by choice that we do with some of our programming.
Is the challenge also that you do, does it ever lead to adoption, or is that part of the process?
So originally, Diane Delafield, who started this organization, that was her mission for helping kids get adopted. The current mission, like I said, is working with youth in Western North Carolina, or sorry, in the whole state of North Carolina, to be seen and heard and valued, and support systems supporting kids in foster care. Now, obviously, that if we can support families to get to adoption, that's wonderful. That's not specifically our mission right now, but we definitely are one of the piece of the supportive circle that if kids wish to be adopted, and what's interesting is that kids, once they get older, may not want to be adopted. So there's a whole other level of aging out of the system, and there's some pretty grim statistics at that point, which is part of the reason that this our village is so important, and not just our nonprofit. It's all of us in this community knowing about this and helping however we can to support these kids, because as soon as they're 18, if they have not been adopted, they're out on the street, and so organizations like ABCCM and different places, there really are multiple levels of this village past what we do. Where we focus is on kids 7 to 19 with these great programs, but there is a ripple effect, and once they get into that older place, if they decide, or because of circumstances have to age out, we've done a rites of passage, so we have a space for the older kids to connect, and there's also a care circle afterwards that the kids themselves run. So there's definitely like a long-term connection, and these kids need support forever, really. If and that's why this is such an important organization that we have, and connecting with other people and organizations is because there's not like okay, you're fixed now. These are children that we need to care for as our community deeply.
2 questions. Do you see yourself going back into the summer program? If not this summer, next summer, or in the future?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know yet. It's we're right on that edge of transformation ourselves and potential transition. So once, I'll let you know as soon as we know.
And also, how do you measure the success of the program? In other words, you have a lot of kids go through it. How do you define success?
So when in previous iterations, in the previous years of Under One Sky, there were children actually going up to Washington, D.C., telling their story, being able to really own their experience. So that is definitely a measure of success, is as children are getting older, they come back. And, it's what's really, really cool about, I'm going to just come back to our youth services director again, and our director, Kelly. Kelly and Marnie, our leadership team is very focused on this idea of outcomes. So we have surveys that we do. We connect after every single camp. We look at the goals that the kids and their caregivers and their social workers are, what those goals are. And then we really try to support that. So again, the kids feel like they're just playing, but we're holding that space for these goals to come to fruition. And so then after every camp, we talk to caregivers. There's a lot of communication. We ask the kids how they're doing, how they're feeling, and then check in with them. And so, at the end of the year, we go to that place, and that's one of the ways we look at, like, how are we doing? You look at these kids and they want to come back. And that's really wonderful.
Katie, if folks want to get in touch with you or the organization to find out more or to volunteer, what's the best bet?
So you can email me directly, katie@underonesky.org. Again, we've got Facebook. Now the Facebook is, it has to be Under One Sky Village Foundation, and that is ONE instead of the number 1. And then Under One Sky Village is Instagram. But everywhere else, it's the number 1. So there's also, you can just Google Under One Sky Village Foundation in Asheville also, and you'll find us. but www.underonesky.org is our website. And then I'm Katie at underonesky.org.
Great. And I'd like to thank you, Katie Kasben, for being my guest the second half hour on the BLAINESWORLD show. Also
you.
to Chaplain Vanessa James being guest the first half hour, and to Cappy Tussetti, my producer. Look forward to having you join me next Wednesday here at 9 a.m. on WPVM 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina. And you can also find us online at WPVM's Facebook page. Katie, thanks a lot. Stay with us as we sign off the air. Okay,
Yes.
great. Thanks. See you soon.